Another overdose?
Nicole! In the immortal words of John Mason, welcome to the Rock. That's a prison. It's the Rock, Alcatraz. It doesn't matter right now, but it is relevant to what we're talking about today on a new Won't You Be My Gamer. I'm Elise Willems.
I'm Nicole Zavalich, and this is the show where we humble gamers are joined by an expert to enlighten us, to learn, to educate the world.
And today we are talking to the very cool, the very knowledgeable Carrie Blakinger, who, Carrie, you are a journalist for the LA Times. You're somebody who is very intimate with prison reform, inequities in the system, and you've come here 3 times before. We're thrilled to have you back for a final time. And we're playing a game that you specifically requested that we play more of, right? We're putting it on you, Carrie.
Fine,
Okay.
I'll take the blame. It's ridiculous. I'm glad to see what other chaos will ensue.
And what is this game, Nicole?
Good
Seems
news,
to be lots
the
of
chaos
chaos.
is happening. This is Prison Architect, and I didn't start the fire, okay? It was always burning since the world's been turning.
At the start of the level, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I am going to try and put this fire out.
And Carrie, you mentioned that fires are a problem in prisons.
Yes, there are some jails and prison systems where people are just routinely lighting fires, sometimes to get the guards' attention, if the guards routinely ignore them, and sometimes just to heat their food. This does seem like a concerningly large fire. There was actually a riot in over 100 years ago in the LA jails, and it was overcrowded, and they'd thrown someone in the hole for starting a fire, and then more fires started, and there was a large riot, and the LA Times editorial board came out in support of the prisoners.
Oh,
because
wow.
that's how bad the jail conditions were back then.
You probably don't see that much, right?
You do not.
Yeah.
You do not. But I've been doing some research on the history of the LA jails, so I'm a fount of useless knowledge on that front.
Would you ever write a book about that?
No, but I did write a chapter of a book that is going to come out next year, I think. It was a collection of things about LA history, and I was tasked with doing the jails piece, and it was super interesting. I know a lot of useless facts. Parts of Sunset Boulevard were built by city inmates on a chain gang.
Really?
Yeah.
Any other weird, interesting facts in your research from that?
Yeah, LA actually built its first jail before they held their first election. We have a longer history of incarceration than democracy. I also was just blown away by looking through LA Times archives, how over the course of 100 or so years, at almost every moment, LA has either been in the process of building a new jail or debating whether to build a new jail. It's just constant,
By building a new jail, do you mean in addition to existing, or
both? Sometimes they're talking about needing to build a new one in addition, and sometimes it's do we replace the existing one? Right now, there's a big debate over what to do about Men's Central Jail, which is 60 years old and a complete mess. Although not as much of a mess as this, which you have just let fall to the ground.
Nicole, we just lost a whole building here. What happened?
We lost 2.
Did anybody die? Are you going to get?
Okay,
You're going to get this prison sued again.
Oh, there's a
Injured?
single survivor.
But he's going to be okay.
It's Don Palermo. Oh no,
Why
he's
are
a
there
mob boss.
construction workers running around in a burning
We're not.
prison?
That's not going to go well for us.
No. All right, I'm going to hire some doctors. I'm going to bulldoze some buildings,
Build a new game room.
build a new kitchen/game room, and a garbage zone. You got to have a garbage zone.
You can't just throw garbage bags in a pile in a little square and call it the garbage.
Does seem like that's exactly what I just
Seems
did.
that she's exactly doing that right now, Carrie.
Again, you're in the moral right. I'm wrong, but I did do it.
I feel like these are some sort of environmental violations.
It could use a ping pong table.
I'm gonna add a pool table
Yeah,
to just
thank
even
you.
it out.
There
To
we
even
go.
it out.
There we go.
I'm actually a little baffled by this idea of having a pool table in a prison. Okay, none of that makes sense.
Well, and
you don't have things that facilitate gambling, right? But you also pool cues. That's clearly
yeah.
a weapon.
And the balls
Pool
are quite
balls?
heavy.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of absurdly dangerous things that they do have in prisons. Where I was in New York, they you couldn't have Q-tips; those were banned. The rumor was that somebody had burst an eardrum and sued, but I've never found anything to back that up. But you could have cans because you could buy canned food on the commissary, and then you open the can and it's got a sharp can top.
Yeah.
We use those as our knives to cook with.
So the wreckage is being cleared
Working on
as
it.
we speak.
Right? Are you starving people?
That's a great question, and maybe yes.
There are no canteens accessible prisoners in the cell will have nowhere to eat.
As soon as this is finished clearing, we are going to build a new one. So let's start now.
But what about, like what Carrie's saying, in the meantime, where do they eat?
You gotta get them like bagged lunches. So in Texas prisons, when, they would have these lockdowns every few months and they, nobody could leave their cells. They'd lock you in and you would stop going to the mess hall and they would serve everybody what they called Johnny Sacks. And it was these brown bags that often had semi-moldy sandwiches or just some of the most unrecognizable food. I actually wrote a story about it when some people that were in prison and had contraband phones were sending pictures of the inedible food that they were being served. Like ridiculous things. Like one person got a hot dog and a tortilla, like no bun, just a hot dog with a tortilla and a whole uncooked potato.
That's what the prison gave them?
Yeah, but I mean, hopefully you can do better than that. But if you're not feeding people, you should at least give them bag lunches of hopefully edible food.
I could not
hopefully
agree
better
more.
than Texas.
Let me
prison.
lay down some bamboo flooring first. Big Bamboo's paying me to say that.
We are very deep in the pocket of Big Bamboo at
Bamboo.
Nondescript Private Prison. Flowery
You have a
field.
flowery field.
Yeah,
Can you put a
totally.
flowery field inside the
Uplift
building?
morale,
I'll let you
there
do
a
that.
little bit.
Let's just do it. This whole canteen is going to have a flowery floor.
I mean, maybe you can actually grow some food inside. I mean, probably need sunlight, but
Are there any prisons where they have like a garden, like a community garden for inmates?
Yes, there are prisons that have a variety of different like garden options. The more depressing version of that is Texas prisons that have farms. There's also some other prisons that have prison farms, and Texas prisoners do produce some of the food that they eat in prisons. Texas prisoners are forced to work these farm jobs for no pay because Texas is one of the few states that doesn't pay prisoners, and they work with no pay in 100-degree weather outside and then go back to housing units that are also not air conditioned. And the wild thing, I did a story about this a few years ago where Texas prison like industries, which includes all of their things they produce, so they raise cattle and pigs, and they make some canned foods, and they also make some clothes. They harvest cotton, and they grow food, and they're actually losing money, which is kind of wild when you're not paying your labor force.
How are they losing money on that?
So not entirely clear. I think part of it is that when you're running a prison labor operation of any kind, you have the higher paid security positions. You have to pay both the guards and the civilians, and then there's supervisory positions over those. So you actually have a lot of paid positions to manage your unpaid workforce, and your unpaid workforce doesn't want to be there. There's no reason for them to be productive. It doesn't benefit them. You have pretty limited work days because of counts and things, so it's just not an efficient way to run a workforce in a lot of ways.
Oh, this is our single casualty here.
Why? Oh my God, he has a gun inside a prison.
Yeah.
Guns you would only have around the outside, like the perimeter guards would have them.
Gotcha.
Like you don't have guns inside a prison.
We need to add that to our prison inaccuracies list. There's a family business to run. The Palermo name is all we've got.
Well, how nice that this prison is accommodating
He
this
has a
family.
cigar and a ring.
So accommodating and kind of this prison to just really let these guys.
Is this a true thing, Carrie? Like, do people who are part of organized crime get special treatment or any, thing in prison?
So there's not a lot of organized crime in women's prisons. So that's not something I would have directly had experience with. I think that in some cases, to some degree, but not officially, if that's sort of what happens at a given prison because somebody is high ranking in whatever sort of criminal organization and they're, other people are just deferentially giving them more things or better things. Like that's the more likely scenario to happen. Or somebody is high up in a criminal organization, so they're being put in solitary, which is not better. But it might be easier to sneak them stuff. And the other way in which people who are running organizations like that would have better time per se is just because they'd have the connections to get all sorts of contraband items that other people wouldn't.
I think it's fair to say that Nicole's prison is pretty bad. Well, isn't that the thing, Carrie? Aren't prisons supposed to be bad?
I mean,
people are supposed to be
technically, no.
not having a great time.
Technically, no. Technically, the punishment is the separating them from society. They're not supposed to be tortured or like treated worse while they're there. But the other thing is, from a practical standpoint, it doesn't really behoove us as a society to purposely treat people badly. Because if you take someone who is, you know, if you take a broken person and then treat them badly for years, that's not improving public safety because they're not going to get out better, more functional, or, you know, just more able to live a productive life. So, I mean, aside from whatever, you know, we might want punitively that for prisons to do, it just doesn't make sense from a public safety perspective, which is theoretically the point.
Fridges have been delivered. Ingredients are being dropped off. I need to get tables and some benches.
She doesn't even have any lighting in there. Like, is that not a safety issue?
That's a big safety issue. That's definitely a safety
Guys,
issue.
Rome's prisons weren't built in a day, is I believe the saying.
Somebody just overdosed, didn't they? Again. What are we going to do about
Well,
that?
I'm not supplying drugs.
Where are they getting benches for $20?
IKEA? Was it like Sweden where they were like, we've got one person in prison? I forget where there was some country where they're like, we've got one person. They're the bad person.
Well, that is definitely not what's happening in this
No.
country.
But to have one troublemaker, the dream. So kind of like what's happening here.
Another overdose?
Nicole! We're gonna get sued.
Garner.
Garner's stuck in the jail door.
Well,
He's going to sue too.
well, in the last game, I didn't have enough money to call my lawyer, so hopefully none of them can either.
You mentioned that the warden, so I guess Nicole in this situation, would have a lot of oversight.
Well, she's the
over-
architect.
I'm the
Or you're the architect, but I mean, I
I'm
feel
just
like
an
you're in
artist.
cahoots with the warden the way you're treating everyone. But the warden has oversight over a lot of what's going on in the prison. But like, are there any other boards or bodies that kind of help regulate what is happening? Like, it can't just be a single person, right? Right?
It really depends. It depends. Okay, so when you're talking about jails, there is often some state oversight. But when you're talking about prisons, it varies. Some states have some sort of oversight entity. Like Nebraska, for instance, their prisons have an Office of Inspector General that does investigations and writes up reports and stuff. Texas doesn't really have meaningful prison oversight. They have some entities that theoretically do. They have also an Office of Inspector General, but that doesn't do an oversight function. They do more like a policing function. That's actually been a long campaign in Texas that activists have been trying to get there to be any sort of independent oversight entity. And that's also been a long-standing issue with the federal prisons. In LA, in the LA jails, there are multiple oversight entities because I think I mentioned before that there's at least 3 long-standing class action lawsuits, all of which have federal monitoring involved. Then there's also an Office of the Inspector General that goes in and does inspections every so often. And there's a Civil Brand Commission, which does surprise inspections. They do great work. And then there's also a Civilian Oversight Commission, and yet the place is still a complete mess.
I feel like that's what's happening here.
Look at all these. So I couldn't put the fancy flowers inside, but I did spend a bunch of time and money putting flowers on the outside.
It just look quite nice.
So did I?
That's nice.
Yeah.
That is a good touch. I
Yeah.
do like that.
Food's in the process of happening, but the flowers have already begun.
I'm a little concerned that you've had no food for long enough that you could have entire flowers grow.
The inmates look really hungry.
Wait,
Just
your
in
prison's
the-
overcrowded. Look at that. You've got 90
How
out
did I
of
get
81
more?
prisoners and 18 out of 30. You are going to have a riot. What? Why is your guard number fluctuating?
Are they quitting?
They're quitting.
Maybe it's too good a job.
I don't think that's usually how that works. Is crowding an issue in prisons?
Yeah, and a lot. You know what's really interesting? It's not just crowding; it's also the amount of space that individual inmates have. And I didn't realize how small our prison cells are compared to other countries until I was writing a story a couple years ago that there was a guy who'd been charged with something in Texas, and he fled back to Scotland, and Scotland would not extradite him because Texas prisons didn't meet international human rights standards. And the specific way in which they did not meet them was the cells aren't big enough.
Nicole's cells look pretty tiny, I have to say.
Hey, what are the dimensions?
Well, not good.
You're extremely understaffed. This is also a national problem. Like, there's a lot of prisons that, whether you want to call it understaffing or over-incarceration, they don't have as many guards as they would need to run the
Let's create
facility
jobs.
safely.
A janitor?
Okay, that's unnecessary, actually. Usually prisons,
really?
the inmates do that.
Well, wouldn't it be nice if they didn't? Psychologist.
Okay, that does seem good.
I like that the
office.
psychologists
You have an
just
office.
roam around
Look at the many
outside.
psychologists I'm hiring.
Wow. Put them in one super office.
That's exactly what I was
Yeah.
going to do. They don't get special treatment. This is prison.
You just created a prison for psychologists.
You've made Arkham Asylum. There's a parole. Do you have the parole room? Because maybe that's how we.
Oh, maybe that's how you decrease the population.
Yes.
So let's build a parole office.
Can we just parole all of them, perhaps, and get them out of this
Yeah, can we
burning
facilitate
human rights
an
violation?
escape? Like, can I just delete all the doors? Can I fire all the guards?
Don't fire all the guards.
That one guy was just made a run for it. Look at him.
Yes.
Door bamboo. Hello.
Your prisoners will be eligible for parole after serving 50% and 75% of their terms.
Their fate will be decided in this room with the warden and the chief.
The kitchen's not done, but man.
Well, we're gonna get. We don't need to
just
eat.
send
We're
them
sending
home.
them out.
So we're adding power. I think we're doing great.
Can you schedule parole hearings now?
I don't know if the prison architect does.
We can't even assign 2 guards to patrol the inner courtyard.
But I'm
I
working
just
on-
think if I were the prison architect, I would want to really get that in place before I get sued repeatedly. Wait, sprinklers were an option all along? I see a sprinkler right there.
Look at how all these chefs are getting to work. You know, we've got.
This is actually another job that is typically done by prisoners, is the cooking. Like, I worked mess hall in one of the prisons I was in.
What was your job?
I usually like doing the dishes, just be in the back and not talk to anyone.
Yeah, that sounds nice.
It was terrible. Mess hall was one of my least favorite jobs because you had to get up at 4 a.m. and you couldn't bring anything with you. So like you would do all the prep work and then you'd have some time to kill before people would actually start coming in. But you literally just have to sit there at tables, like stare at the wall because you couldn't bring a book or like crosswords or whatever. I mean, I started smuggling in pages of crosswords in my shoe so that I could do them at the mess hall table at like 5:30 in the morning. One of the scariest things in prison was like right at the end when I had already been granted release and I didn't have to go in front of a parole board. It was just the type of sentence I had. It was a guarantee you get it after 5/7 of your time unless you really, really screw up and catch a disciplinary case, like a pretty bad one. So I knew I was getting out. I had a date, and then they called me down to parole, which was at the chapel at that point. They didn't even have a separate parole office. They just had us go to the chapel. And
My prison's
I was
better?
like, oh my God, I already have a date. Why is parole calling me down? Are they going to change it? Are they going to take it away? And they just screwed up. They just screwed up. They called all these people that were already like out, that were already going to get out, and like made us wait for hours and hours, thinking that we were about to be considered for release.
Oh my gosh.
And we were like, no, we have dates. Why are we here? It was terrifying.
Yeah. Nicole's the type of like architect / warden that would totally April Fools everybody and be like, just kidding. I think we got to check out what's going on in the parole office because that's our big.
We're now up to 109 inmates?
Yeah, we got to get people out of here, Nicole.
I do appreciate that you have well-staffed mental health services. I'll give you that.
Me too.
I mean, these people are going to need a lot of therapy after all the
First
starvation
the
and the
fire,
fires.
then the starvation.
So it looks like we just can't even parole people yet in the game. The system's broken.
That's really interesting that that's the choice this game is giving you, is you can't parole people, but it will let you build more prison.
It's almost like it's a system that they don't want fixed.
I mean, honestly, also, as much as I like the robust mental health staffing, like this sort of psychologist to prisoner ratio just doesn't happen in U.S. prisons.
And it looks like the shower flooded, making a bath. That's kind of fun.
Yeah, it's like when a fire hydrant bursts and all the kids are playing in the street.
Yeah.
You know, same vibes. Carrie, if you had to grade Nicole's prison with a letter grade, what would you
It's
give
Garner. He keeps getting.
it? Remember, there is such a thing as an A++. So,
If you're considering giving me that, you have that option.
D minus?
Okay, well, you know what D's for? It's for diploma. Okay, I'm graduating.
The only reason this isn't an F is because you have not had a riot, and it doesn't appear that at least any of your staff have beaten any prisoners to death. Like, these are the only wins I can think of for you. That's
Right.
how low the bar is.
And I credit that with the pool tables.
There are going to be multiple class action lawsuits, though. Please know that. Did you ever put in sprinklers, by the way?
well, that's about all the time we have.
fire sprinklers.
Okay. This was started on fire, and she never put in the sprinklers. And
I have concerns.
well, thank you so much for coming, regardless, and teaching
been
us
great.
all about prisons and reform. And where can people find you and your work online?
I'm on Instagram and TikTok at Carrie Blakinger, and you can follow my reporting at the LA Times.
Cool. And to Nicole, any last words?
This has been so great. I learned a lot. The buildings all have fire sprinklers now.
Honestly,
Yeah.
that's a win.
Yeah, and that was
I'm
because
proud
of
of
you
you for that one.
You did that. This was your impact.
The change. The change. There we go.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much to everyone for watching. Tune in next week. In the meantime, how can people support us and the show, Nicole?
Well, yeah, you can find us. We're PBS SoCal on Instagram, on YouTube. There's lots of ways to support. Like, subscribe, tell a friend.
See you next time.
Bye.